Hello, I'm Phil Svitek, 360 creative coach, and welcome to my blog where it is both my mission and my pleasure to highlight my creative journey in hopes of inspiring you and giving you a specific takeaway, all with the intent that your journey can be at least a little bit easier. Now, it's been a while since I've provided an update. Life has been very productive. I don't like to use the word busy. I like the word productive because it has been productive, right? Busy implies that you're not in control of your own time. Productive kind of indicates that you are. And so, yeah, it's been a busy time for me. That's partially why, if you're just kind of listening to this, you hear all the background noise. I'm, doing a traveling vlog, right? I'm driving to my next destination. So in between the time of getting there, I'm doing this. So, last we spoke, I've kind of given an update on where we were at with my latest project, a film project, a 2D animated sci-fi fantasy called The Arbiters. We've been in development of it. And since that time, we essentially finished up everything that we needed in order to present it. So we have a really polished version of a pitch deck. We have the 2-minute proof of concept that we were working towards for months, right? And it's finally completed. So we have that. We have a much more polished version of the script, even more so than before. And what we were gearing up for specifically was the American film market, which was in Vegas from November 5th to November 10th. Now, part of our efforts preparing for AFM, we got access to this site called Sanando. And it's like a site of various buyers, distributors, production companies, and so forth. And so we were given access to that at the start of October. So I made mention when the date for the actual event was. So we had just over a month to, essentially do our research. Now, we already knew like the big companies that we wanted to go out for. Luckily, we got an exhibitor list of the various companies that would be there a little bit in advance. So maybe like last week of September. So we were able to kind of just do at least a little bit of research that way. But once we got access to Sanando, we really were able to deep dive and not just find the companies, right? So once we identified the companies, it was about, okay, let's do a little bit more research. Let's see who's specifically going to AFM from their teams. So, is it John? Is it Sally? Is it Brenda? Is it Carl? Whoever it is. So we can, outreach to them. And part of that is also figuring out, okay, do they have their email listed or their phone number? Like, how do we actually get in contact with them? Now, the one thing I will say, so Sanando does have like a messaging app. So if people don't leave their phone number, you can be notified or you can notify people through their messaging app. Now, the downside of that is it does not actually send you like any sort of notification at all. So it doesn't send you an email notification of like, even just like a roundup of, hey, you have some new messages you might want to check in on through Sanando. So you have to like actively go into Sanando and go into messages, right? It doesn't just like even overtly tell you that you have these new messages. You have to like specifically go there. And so we quickly learned that doing outreach specifically through Sanando was not going to be very fruitful. And so unfortunately, we wasted like 2 days probably worth of like actually concerted efforts to those. So then what we did was we had to essentially circle the wagons and be like, okay, the people that we reached out to, because they didn't have an email, we have to now try to find an email or try to find a different way in with them. So that was annoying, but it is what it is. And, one of our things was we specifically made an email template of the key things we wanted to hit when we were doing outreach, but we also wanted to specify the email as much as possible at the beginning towards whoever we were reaching out to, right? We didn't want to just send out a blanket email. That's the same. It's like, okay, well, why are you contacting me? This doesn't necessarily, you want to make people feel special because that'll get you more bang for your buck potentially, right? So that's what we were hoping to do. And that's what we ultimately did do. It's just that when I say this, we had like a list of 300 companies we were going to reach out to. So that's 300 emails you have to customize. And part of that customization is you have to do a little bit of research into, the types of projects to highlight why it would make sense for them and so forth. Now, that's a lot of work, right? As I've said before, this is not my full-time job. I have, other stuff that pays the bills, as does the rest of my team. And so even though this was a priority, even though we knew this was coming in, one of the things we had decided was, okay, this is going to be a lot of work. Let's hire a virtual assistant. And a virtual assistant is just, a person that is assisting you, no different than any other personal assistant. They just happen to be in a remote location. So we put out an ad through Upwork, interviewed some people, and found somebody we liked really well. The price worked for us. And we were able to utilize that. And that was a big godsend. At first, Astoria from our team, she never utilized the virtual assistant, right? And I get it. Sometimes it's one of those things, like it's easier, as painful as it is and time consuming as it may be, it's like almost easier to do it yourself because then it's still organized, what went where. But, the reality of how much work we were doing quickly hit. And so Astoria relented and we figured out the right game plan. And she was so thankful. Our virtual assistant's name was Maria, and she did a tremendous job of doing the preliminary research. And, we tested her out with a couple of drafts for some emails, and she did really well, right? So then we're like, all right, let's go to town. Like, you pre-draft all the emails, we'll double check them. But it ended up working out really well. It saved us a lot of time and effort. But then still, you have to kind of then copy and paste it, into emails and so forth, which doesn't seem time consuming, but, unfortunately, like copying something from a Word document into like an email, it always kind of oddly messes up the formatting. So we always had to like make sure the formatting was good again. So you just kind of have to reset it. So again, it's not that it seems like a lot, you're talking like 2 to 3 minutes per email, but when you have 300 emails, that can add up, right? And so that's just sending the emails. Then obviously you want to sort of mark it down of, who you reached out to. So you have like this accurate list of where you're at. So anyone can look at it, including yourself, because if you're sending in that much, you're going to ultimately, not always remember where you are at with certain things. And, as certain people get back to you, then you're having to deal with that. So it's just kind of constantly a lot, right? So yeah, the last like week and a half, 2 weeks of just AFM preparation. A lot of time and effort went into that, scheduling meetings. And, it's one of those things, okay, like if you're not hearing back from some of your heavy hitters, how can you reach back out in a polite way, try to get on their radar, try to schedule a meeting. And that was my overarching goal, was that if we're going to go do this thing, we're going to be with all these people, all in one place who we would want to be talking to. Like, obviously, let's be professional and things like that, but let's take advantage of it as much as possible. If things will happen, right? There's so many things you can't control, but you can control the outreach. You can control, just trying to make stuff happen. And so that was kind of my big mission for everybody, and everyone really stepped up to the plate and delivered, and we got the various meetings that we were hopeful to get, not every single one of them, but we got a good amount of meetings beforehand. And then as we started getting closer to the actual date of AFM, we started figuring out, okay, how can we fill in those gaps? And I'll talk about that in a moment. But it was that idea of like, obviously we're there, so spur of the moment, we want to try to make meetings happen. Now, one of the serendipitous aspects that happened to all of this is we got a meeting with one of the heads of Animation Magazine. This was Friday before the start of the American film market. And we were connected through a friend that one of our team members knows. And yeah, she knows the various players, obviously, in the animation space, given her magazine, right? And it so happened that they had the World Animation Summit just kicking off in a few days, a little bit before the American film market, and then some of it during the American film market. And it actually took place in LA. So she said that you guys should definitely come to the World Animation Summit, even if it's just for 1 or 2 days. There was an opening night gala, and then they had like day events where it's a really fun event where you have a lot of networking opportunities, but then also panels, and it's very intimate. So I'll go in more detail about that, but essentially she invited us to go. Now, there was a cost associated with it, but I looked at it and I was like, okay, at this point, we're in for a penny, in for a pound, and I think it'll just help, right? It's just healthy. It's in LA. Let's do it. Now, it did mess it up in the sense, like, not only just financially, now we're paying more than we expected for this entire week, but to that same notion, we had planned on leaving midday Monday out of LA, so that way we can get into Vegas, not terribly late. We could check into the hotel, rest up, and have Tuesday meetings, begin on November 5th. Like, we could be cool, calm, and collected. Well, with the animation, or the World Animation Summit, again, a great thing. It's just we had to shift our schedule. So now we would essentially be leaving for Vegas on Monday night, which I was trying to avoid, but it was what it was. So we jumped on that opportunity to go to the World Animation Summit. Now, as part of all this, you're prepping in the background. Like, I had to get ahead of my regular work as well, on top of everything that I've been kind of describing. And in addition to just scheduling meetings, you have to get, for us, a lot of other things in place. So we wanted to make sure we had all of our materials. So as I mentioned, we had a pitch deck. So it's like printing that out, having it be glossy, and kind of, in a nice presentational book, not just like printed pages, right? But like high quality paper. It looks good. It's like a flip book that you can turn, and it just looks great. Then also just the various other aspects. And I remember one of the things that I wanted was just kind of a schedule of everything and people's faces. So we knew, like, we can visually make a connection if we saw somebody. We can be like, oh, that's such and such person, and that way if you bump into them, you can be like, hey, you're Timmy, nice to meet you, and blah, 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 right? Like, you can have those spur of the moments. So that's something we did. And then I told Astoria, let's also create like a note sheet template. Because I was like, we can, yes, of course, take notes in our notebooks, but then it just ends up being in our notebooks, and it's more difficult to like do anything with it, right? So what I wanted was a page per company that we were meeting with, and just have like a template of like, okay, who's the company? Who are we meeting with? Just some background information of what the company does, some notable films that we might know, and then, a place for our actual notes, and then a place for action items. And so we had created that, and Astoria, to her credit, she pre-filled in all the various information for the companies that we knew we were meeting with. And yeah, to me, it was very beneficial, but I love how my team sort of made fun of me for that. But I will say, it did get a lot of credit at AFM, the American Film Market, because people saw that and they're like, oh, wow, you're prepared. And that's part of the osmosis that I was trying to convey, was this idea that, yeah, we are to be taken serious. We're not here to play around. We've worked on this project. We're ready for the next level. And we want the right partner to come on board who sees the vision, right? So we did that. So, that's all preparation for it. Now, so Sunday night was the kickoff for the the World Animation Summit. So I didn't necessarily know what to expect. It was at the Garland Hotel here in Los Angeles. And so I went there, and it was like a cocktail reception. And I have to say, like, what I love about animation, yes, you get this with filmmakers where, people can be warm with each other and they tend to be like more artists, but there's something even more welcoming and accepting of people within the animation space. It was a very intimate event, and everybody who was there was basically somebody doing amazing, amazing things. So you had like the writer-director of Wild Robot, the director of Moana 2, the director of Kubo and the Two Strings, one of my favorite movies, writers from Undone, the heads of incredible animation companies, ones that have like created Robot Chicken, and just a whole who's who of just people in the animation space, whether that was 3D, 2D, stop motion, and anything in between, right? And they're speaking with you like you're their peer, and just genuinely being curious on your behalf of like, oh, what are you up to, right? And so you have like the writer-director of Wild Robot being interested in what you have to say. And that's amazing. And it's not disingenuous. It's all very authentic. So it was great. And then, by day 2, when you have like these whole days planned out where you have like a breakfast, that's a networking thing. And it's great because you could sit at any one of these people's tables and they don't shun you away. They're very welcoming. So you get to know some people. Excuse me. Then you go in for panel discussions, and, you learn more about certain topics within the animation space. So you do a couple of those. Then you have lunch. And again, that becomes a networking thing. And then you do more panels. And then you have another, kind of cocktail reception. And this goes on for several days. As I said, we only went for the 2 days. But the fun part is, like, by midday of, the second day that we were there, it's like you already know all these people and you're like best friends with them, right? And so as far as making these connections, if you go year to year, like you become sort of like kindred spirits in a sense with all these people, and just develop that bond. And that's what I loved about it, because the American film market is kind of not counter opposite to that, but it's certainly much more expansive, right? Like the American film market took place in the Palms Hotel, and not that it took over the whole hotel, but it took over, a lot of floors of this one tower. It took over various floors elsewhere, and people were also spread out throughout the casino and like the food courts and this and that. So there's just a lot going on, right? By design. You had the Palms Casino has theaters, like screening rooms And you had like 9 or 10 of these showing various movies throughout each day and stuff like that. So there's an overwhelm of stuff to do. Whereas with the World Animation Summit, you're kind of all doing the same thing. You know, like if you're there for that day, you're all doing the same activity, so you can bond over that a little bit easier. And I'm not saying one's better than the other. I'm just comparing and contrasting, if you will. Again, part of it's each one has a different goal. One is to build that community and kind of highlight what is going on in the animation world and make those connections. With the American film market, as the title implies, people are buying and selling films and TV and so forth, right? Projects. So we got to Vegas, you know, our first day was pretty packed. A lot of great, exciting meetings. And then for day 2, kind of looked at it as like, okay, how do we, you know, maximize our time? And so I would kind of just go out in the morning and, you know, I did a whole scout of like what's where and stuff like that. Just to know the lay of the land, because it was so expansive. And, you know, through that, you know, like I saw various signage and things like that. So things started clicking in my head of like, there might be some opportunities. So I remember I went into the sponsor lounge and was like, hey, you know, such and such person here that listed that they would be here and so forth. So you kind of start to like figure out, you know, who you can approach and who you have to be a little bit more wary of. But like, there was a whole lounge just for sponsors. So I was like, oh, okay. Like if they're a sponsor, you know, that's a little bit more open if they're just like a buyer. And lo and behold, I went in there and got like a really fruitful meeting with the company that I was like looking to just meet. And I wasn't even necessarily, like I didn't necessarily know what would come out of the meeting. I just knew the company and wanted to speak with them. And it turned out to be a very potentially fruitful meeting. Then one of the other things, so that was like day 2. Day 3, you know, we started identifying, okay, there's these giants we would love to get in front of. They haven't like responded to us. How do we get on their radar without just barging in to the room? Because that would be rude and unprofessional and yada, yada. So I remember, Sarah, who was with us, she had made this suggestion of like, hey, write a free form letter for each of the companies that you want to reach out to. So we identified 5 that were just like, I would love to work with these people. And just write everything you would want to say to them, right? Just free form, have at it. And that's it, right? So I did that for the 5 companies. Sarah and Astoria reviewed those and then revised each letter, you know, based on my free form. And then what we essentially did was we had the letters, you know, we got them printed, I signed them, and we got each company a little like gift basket, right? So we like personalized the gift baskets. We got them various stuff. We went out shopping, and you know, it wasn't overly expensive, but nice enough. Like, you know, we got them some snacks and candles and, you know, drinks and, you know, part of it was like, hey, we know the days are long and not everyone gets to eat. So we just wanted to kind of give you something that would, you know, brighten your days up while the remainder of your days at AFM, right? That was kind of how we oriented it. And that worked out really well, right? So, and again, none of this is guaranteed. And to Sarah's credit, she was like, is there anything missing from these letters that, you know, you would regret if they didn't know? Excuse me. And I was like, no, you know, they did a really good job to make sure to include like everything that I would have wanted it in there to be in there was, And so, yeah, then on Thursday morning is when I essentially went out and about. Like what I did was, I always liked, the market started at like 9 a.m. Like that's when it officially kicked off. But you can get into various places from like 8 a.m., right? So I always just like to kind of walk around and, you know, just bump into various people that were in the hallways and stuff like that and yada yada. So what I did was, yeah, I took all the gift baskets, and the goal was to put them outside people's doors, meaning their suites, their company suites, before they got in for the day. And so mission accomplished there. Now, as of right now, like basically we got an email back in response to one of these the day of, and it was a very sweet email. You know, now they were also very truthful of that we're a little bit too early in terms of where we're at for them to like consider us. They like to have people be a little bit further along, but they found it very sweet. And essentially for us to keep them on the radar as we make progress. Now, the other companies haven't gotten back to us. Now, does that mean it's a waste? No, not necessarily. They might not never get back to us, but at the same time, they might, you know. I mean, the thing about it is, yes, the convention starts at 9 a.m. and, you know, ends around 6 officially, but, you know, it goes on as long as you want it, right? So there were certain companies that like had meetings till 7 p.m. each day. And then, of course, there's the parties and the dinners and the drinks. So, you know, and that was kind of my other thing. Like, it's funny because like myself, Sarah, and Astoria, we're all technically more introverts, right? And Sarah stayed with her family who lived in Vegas, so she would always like drive in and drive out. Astoria, you know, she had her room, I had my room, and, you know, Astoria liked to work from inside her room, which I understand, I generally do too. But, you know, I joked that I was like the Little Mermaid, right? Where I wanted to be where the people were. And so whenever I could just be on my computer or wherever, like just in the space of people, excuse me. And I remember like even just one night I was like, okay, you know what? I could just be in my room, but let me just go downstairs to the bar. I'm not going to drink. You know, I'll just have, if anything, like a non-alcoholic drink, or just water, and I'll just get some like food, you know, just cheap food. And just be around people, right? And that was another thing that like allowed me to connect with people and just, yeah, move the ball forward in some capacity. And, you know, none of it's guaranteed, but I just wanted to be where the people were, going back to that idea of like, for me, if I'm going to be in Vegas, I want to maximize it. And that, you know, by saying that doesn't mean I begrudge Sarah for leaving or for Astoria working from her room. They needed to do what they needed to do. And obviously people need some downtime, and, you know, part of that is what works best for them. And so, yeah, I very much obviously wanted them, whatever was most productive for them to be able to do that. And, you know, speaking to that effect, we all took the meetings for the most part. Like there was like 3 meetings that I took by myself, which were very fruitful. One of them was like the spur of the day meeting that I happened to get on the books, and it was in this like what was called like a buyer's lounge. And so if you didn't have like a specific badge, the buyer would only be able to bring in one outside person who didn't have the badge. So part of it was like just by the rule set of it, if you will. But then also because it was like, for lack of a better term, this random meeting, we didn't want to overwhelm the person, right? But I will say it was great to have a team for each of these meetings because we all come into it from different perspectives. We all ask different questions. And then afterwards, we can all kind of just debrief about it and give our perspectives of what do we think about the company? Did we like the people? Do we think it's a viable plan forward? In terms of their strategies, what do we think about their strategies? And, there's one or two companies that I don't think are necessarily the right partners for us. I don't know if it's going to move forward in anything, but they were great meetings. They were great people and just want to essentially keep in touch with those people, right? So part of it is you are building out for the longer term aspect. And, everybody that for the most part goes there already has these pre-established relationships with each other, and as I made mention of like the world animation market, it almost becomes like a reunion each year for a lot of these people. And especially for the American film market, a lot of these people end up going to Berlin and Cannes and stuff like that. And that was the other thing to kind of learn was this idea that the American film market, it's interesting because at this point in time, a lot of the buyers, like they've already bought out for the year and they don't necessarily have budgets. So obviously some of them are looking into next year and stuff like that. But generally Berlin and Cannes tend to be like the bigger markets in terms of buying and selling. So, again, I don't all know like the full statistics and the data and stuff like that, but that's how overall it was presented. But, regardless, part of it is just gaining this various knowledge. Ours is obviously an animation project. So we learn a lot about, the different markets of animation worldwide. What is Japan like? What is China like? What do the European markets look like? What do the South American markets look like? What's the U.S. market look like? Excuse me. Things of that nature, right? By the way, just real quick, I did want to kind of talk about it, but, as far as why I'm coughing, like I'm getting over sort of like the sickness from all of that. Like being in Vegas for any extended period of time just beats your body. Like we were in the Palms, right? And it's not, obviously we had access to the outside and we had a car and we could go places, but we were doing so much, that by the time you're done with things, you just want to kind of chill out in your room, go to sleep, and then wake up the next day. And so for the most part, you're not getting too much sunlight. Like our room had a great view and stuff like that. But once you're like in the hotel and taking these meetings, you're not getting too much sunlight, number one. Number two, the cleanest air that you're breathing is like air conditioned air. But when you're like walking about the casino and stuff like that, it's just smoke filled and stuff like that. So your body kind of takes a beating. Let's just say that, And yeah, so there's that. Anytime you go to like any sort of convention like this, you just got to be mindful of all these things and account for it. And we knew like, the week, especially heading into this, we were already kind of, whatchamacallit, just putting in a lot of work, right? Putting a lot of strain on our bodies and things like that. And so, you're kind of grinding for 2 weeks straight. So that doesn't necessarily help. But, at the end of the day, you got to do what you got to do sort of a thing. And that's what it was. Anyway, talking about greater lessons, one of the big things beyond just learning the different markets, you start to learn, like I said, the people. And it's just interesting. And, one of the things, no one knows anything in a nutshell, right? Like someone will tell you your budget's too high. Others will tell you your budget's way too low. Someone will say this is a very, viable movie. Others will say this will never sell. So ultimately, the fact of it is you just got to find people you align with that see your vision. Like what you're looking for are yeses that align with you. And so it doesn't matter how many no's you get. You just got to get the one yes that can move your project forward, right? And I think that's a big lesson for a lot of artists, don't be disheartened by the no's. It doesn't necessarily mean that your project is not viable or bad or whatever. You just gotta find the people that you mesh with. And part of that also means being amenable. Like there's certain things that when I was talking with people that I really gelled with, they had suggestions and things like that, but because they understood the core of what I was going for, they were changes that elevated it in a way that I would want it elevated rather than just changes to make it different or whatever, and certain people, would suggest changes because from their perspective, they were good changes. Like, okay, based on the market, is there a way to make it PG, excuse me, instead of PG-13 and stuff like that? And again, it's not from their perspective, it's not a bad question to ask. It's not a bad suggestion. But at its core, it's like, okay, well, central to the story is that this is kind of a violent world, and to just go PG, I don't know if you can pull that off while keeping the theme and the emotional core intact, right? So it's just all these various things. So you want to look for the people that understand and see your project for what it is. And overall, it was just a great learning experience. Beyond that, I took Astoria to go see David Copperfield. David Copperfield is a magician regarded as like the best of the best, even beyond Houdini. Someone that I've loved forever. And it happened to be like my birthday weekend, which is funny because everyone thought like, A, that I took off a week of work for my birthday, B, that I was going to Vegas for my birthday, and it was like, okay, both or no. I'm not taking a week off just to go on vacation. I'm literally just now working more. A, and then B, like, no, I'm not going to Vegas for my birthday. I'm going to Vegas for the specific thing. It just happens to be that my birthday lands on it. But going to see David Copperfield was like my birthday treat for myself, and seeing the joy on Astoria's face, who didn't quite know what it would be, but the fact that she did end up then enjoying it was truly, truly amazing. And now, it's all about the follow-ups and figuring out, okay, who actually wants to progress forward? How do we do that? A lot of it becomes a chicken and the egg thing where, some companies might want to move forward, but they want to see X, Y, and Z in place, but it's like you can't move forward. You just need something to create that momentum, right? Like something to break the dam or start the domino effect, whatever it is. And when you can do that, then you start to see things happening. But it is interesting too. There was a keynote speech made at the American Film Market where I forget his name at the moment, but he was speaking about this notion that within the independent film space, obviously buyers want to see the final product before they buy it, but that's a risky proposition because then the Netflixes of the world or the Amazons or Apples can come in and just swoop it. And in order for the indies to like be able to get some of the greater products, meaning the buyers, the indie buyers, they would have to end up paying a premium. And so if you can get in earlier on some of these projects, then they don't necessarily have to cost you as much, right? So it's all these different things that kind of end up going into it. But yeah, it was very fruitful, and it's certainly the stuff that they don't necessarily teach you in film school, but are just so central to the film industry, right? Like if you can't get the funding, how do you make movies, right? It's not exactly a cheap art form. So yeah, just a lot that goes into it, a lot of lesson learned, and I'll certainly keep you updated on progress. But it was, yeah, I had a good time with it. I learned a lot, and as far as expectations, I didn't, like I said, I just wanted productive meetings, and that's what we got. So we'll see how this all goes. A lot of the people that were there that we met with, a lot of their decision making will be based on them reading the script. And, that was something that going into it, we had a good pass of the script, but we were kind of in the middle of a rewrite. And so when we, thanked people for the meetings, we said, hey, just resending all the materials once again that we had provided. But also, since it's AFM, you've got stacked meetings, we'll send you kind of everything else as far as the script, the budget, and so forth later, so that way you have proper time to review. And a lot of them were actually, no, send me the script now. I'm interested to read it. It's like, okay. So I had to call John Comerford, who's working on that revision. So essentially what I did was I went through the script and kind of added in and changed stuff that, that him and I had talked about in terms of the improvements. And then he always goes in and, compresses, changes, amends, and makes it tighter, better, stronger, all that. So, I said, hey, I know where are we at with this and how fast can you turn around? So within a day, he stayed up late and was able to, get me something. So I got it in the middle of the night. I reviewed it in the middle of the night, and yeah, it was really good, really well done. Of course the script isn't an ongoing thing. It's never going to be done. But, it's certainly in really good shape. So we sent it off. We were pleased with it. And, now we continue to evolve it and so forth. So, John and I had a meeting about it yesterday of the ways that we want to see it continue to improve. But, that's kind of where we're at with that. And just kind of continuing on with the various things to continue this development. I'm going to be speaking with the animation team to figure out what our next best steps are. Obviously, I want to keep momentum going in whatever way that I can while we're getting and securing this funding. So we shall see. It's a lot of big ticket stuff. It's new stuff, but exciting stuff. And it feels half like imposter syndrome, but I also know that I've worked really hard to get to this position. And certainly my team has worked hard to get to this position. We're all deserving. And just to be taken that seriously at a major event such as this feels ratifying. And I'm really proud of our entire team. We set out at the start of the year to be prepared for the American film market. That was our objective with all of this. And to have accomplished it, everyone brought their A game to this. Everyone contributed significantly. And so I'm very proud. And I know that there's a path forward regardless of what may come, right? So that's the exciting part. And that's where we're at. So, as always, if you have any questions, thoughts of your own, things of that nature, comment down below or hit me up on social media at Svitek. But I'm very curious to hear back from you. A few things that I haven't talked about is there was a pitch competition that we were a part of and got to attend. That was fruitful. I'll talk about that another time, the lessons learned from that. And as part of that, I did learn about this company called WeFounder, which seems very intriguing to me from the film perspective, but I have to do a little bit more research into that. And so when I do, as I get to know more about it and ideally, get some firsthand knowledge of it, I'll be able to report back on that. But thank you as always. I truly do appreciate you and hope to see you next time.